Thank you for joining me today. It's Brian Gubernick, and welcome to the No Days Off podcast, where we believe that every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. Today, we're going to talk about a concept known as Sheahan's Wall. This very much applies in business, but like most things we talk about here at No Days Off, it also applies in other parts of your world, your health, your relationships, and every place else. So, what is this Sheehan's wall concept about, and how should you be thinking around it? Why does it matter to you? Okay, so Sheahan, Peter Sheehan's actually the guy's name, was an expert in workforce trends. He was an expert in leadership and business. And this wall that was named after him represents the challenges and the barriers that organizations and people face when trying to execute change and execute innovation. So Sheehan's wall is really a metaphor for the point at which companies and individuals have to kind of break through this complacency or this fear and this resistance to truly innovate and to evolve. So if you picture literally a wall, right, and you're on one side of the wall and that's where you're presently sitting in your business or life right now, you have to bust through that wall and execute, change or innovation to get to the other side. So the wall is just this metaphor for this point in which you've got to break through that fear or complacency, that resistance. So the key idea behind Sheehan's wall is that to move forward, your business or you as an individual have to recognize and overcome different obstacles, internal obstacles, external obstacles, those things that prevent you or your business from adapting and seizing new opportunities. Sheehan's wall is used quite a bit in conversation around leadership or around creativity or just around the mindset shift that's required to achieve success in this, really rapidly changing world in which we live. One question I love to ask when I'm going through, goal setting or when we're maybe potentially thinking about tapping out or quitting, I like to ask the question, are you still willing to become the guy or girl you must become in order to get to where you want to go? I think Sheehan's wall is a great example or metaphor in somewhat of a way that kind of demonstrates that question in action. In other words, are you willing to break through that wall? You once were. Are you still willing to do so? Are you willing to become the person you need to be in order to get to where you want to go? So you've got to change, you've got to innovate, you've got to break through that resistance and overcome that fear. So Sheehan's wall highlights really barriers to change, right? So lots of organizations, lots of people hit a wall when they attempt to change or when they attempt to innovate. Maybe that's due to fear of failure. Maybe that's due to entrenched practices, like, here's the way we've always done it. Maybe it's just due to inertia, but there's barriers to change. And that's what this wall is highlighting. In addition, the concept highlights just breaking through. Successful leaders and companies push through these barriers, usually by fostering some sort of open or adaptable or forward thinking mindset or culture. Lastly, when we talk around Sheehan's wall, I think it highlights execution because ideas and strategies only matter if they can be successfully executed. And that's what's required to break through the resistance at the individual level, at the organizational level. So ideas and strategies are great, but they've got to be executed to break through that wall. One thing I've been talking around quite a bit recently is how often I see great ideas and see great strategies, but I don't actually see tactics behind those strategies. In other words, we come up with an innovative way to go solve a problem, but then we don't chunk it down into bite sized pieces that I would call tactics that are specific and measurable and time based. And we don't have a very solid plan. And as a result, we fail in execution. That's kind of, part of this Sheehan's wall conversation. So it's this framework, right, for understanding, for overcoming the natural resistance. And that resistance always comes about when you're trying to transform and innovate. Let's use a couple examples. Some companies we often turn to. sometimes for good things and sometimes for not so good things. Netflix is a great Sheehan's Wall example of a company that had to transition from, if you recall, DVD rentals, mail DVD rentals to streaming. So the wall for them in the early 2000s, Netflix was this DVD by mail service, right? And as streaming technology began to emerge, the company faced lots of resistance internally, really from those leaders within the company that were tied to the DVD model, which was growing and was working for them, but was not the future. Was not Many perceived it not to be the future, but those that kind of dug their heels in may have saw it as the future. So the company faced resistance internally, but it also faced resistance externally from studios that didn't want to license content for streaming. The traditional DVD business was profitable, so there was this strong temptation to stick with the familiar. Right now, who else did that, by the way? Blockbuster. Blockbuster didn't get into streaming and anchored to its brick and mortar rental store. So they sort of bumped into that wall, maybe didn't even perceive it as the wall, but stuck to their guns, stuck to what they knew. Now, that was the wall. Now, breaking through that wall, Netflix recognized that streaming was the future of entertainment. And it was a gamble, right? Even though it required massive investment and technological advancements and a shift in their business model, Netflix began to make a move. Their CEO, Reed Hastings, made this incredibly bold decision. I mean, arguably one of the best decisions in business, at least recent business history. He made this crazy decision to pivot away from the DVD business and bet on streaming. And at the time he made that decision, streaming was pretty much seen as a massive risk. But he focused on this long term potential of streaming and acquiring licenses and eventually investing in their own content. And Netflix broke through this Sheehan's wall. They broke through this wall of resistance and uncertainty. And now you kind of know the story. There's lots of other companies we can turn to. I think a good one to look at is, a company that maybe had the opposite happen. Kodak. See, the wall for Kodak was that Kodak was once a dominant player in photography, but it famously struggled when it came to the digital age, when they had to adapt to the digital age. We've talked about Kodak here before. Even though Kodak had developed the first digital camera in the 70s, the company's leadership really feared that digital photography would kill its profitable film business, and they made some decisions. They didn't want to cannibalize that film business and that ink business. As a result, they ran up against this wall and they failed to break through, just like Blockbuster. So instead of embracing the future, Kodak clung to its film business for way too long, and they were unable to break through the wall of internal resistance and this fear of change. And by the time they realized that they had kind of this dinosaur model, their competitors had already embraced digital photography and overtook Kodak. And the company ended up declaring bankruptcy in 2012. But Kodak's a great example of what happens when companies fail to break through Sheehan's wall and they remained stuck in their outdated business models. So these examples, right? Like these examples of two companies that really face Sheehan's wall in very different ways, they serve as good examples for us to turn to as we look at our own businesses, our own personal worlds. Is it internal resistance to change? Is it external market conditions? Is it a risk of cannibalizing profitable legacy businesses? The key to breaking through that wall or not breaking, and if you're going to fail, it's about leadership. It's about willingness to take risks. It's about the ability to focus on long-term innovation over the short-term comfort. And these are the things we need to be thinking around as we build our respective businesses. So the focusing question for you today, as a business owner, as an individual, where are you running up against this Sheehan's wall concept? Where is your business getting to such that you're recognizing there's a shift or something that may be necessary? And what's your pivot potentially look like? How do you intend to break through that wall? I would contend that in the industry in which I operate, as an example, real estate, that we are very much in a Sheehan's wall environment right now. The industry has been changed with technology. It's been changed in terms of just legal changes as of late, specifically around how we generate revenue in the business. It's also impacted by market conditions and the things going on in our economy today. So we are very much at this point in potentially running into this wall. And the only way to bust through that wall is to have long term thinking, to lead through it, to be innovative, to adapt. And so I think it's a critical moment for us in this particular industry. So if I'm you, I'm probably sitting in front of my whiteboard a couple times a week at a minimum, with an image of this wall in front of me, thinking, what are we going to do to break through? Because we're in this kind of state of unknown. Now, the reality is in business, it always feels like you're in some sort of state of unknown. But I think the focus today, the focusing question is, where is this showing up? Where are you bumping up against the wall, or potentially bumping up against the wall? And what are you going to do about it? What are the changes that you have to consider or make? Where are you lacking innovation? You got to get a bit more creative, or maybe you got to study more or read more, whatever it may be. What are you going to do to overcome this barrier that is Sheehan's wall? That's all I have for you today, the No Days Off podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. So let's get after it.